Hello everyone, welcome back to the Make a Snake Clone series. This is Lose Conditions Part 2, and in this video we're going to make the player lose when the snake runs into itself. Now to get started, you're going to have to go open up your tail prefab and add a new tag, which is a tail tag. I have already done this, so if you haven't already, just go to add tag, press the plus icon, create a new tag, and then make sure you go back to the tail prefab, open it up again, and assign it, because just creating it will not automatically assign it. Now, when we instantiate a tail piece, it will have that tail tag. Next, let's go open up the code here and go down to that onTriggerEnter2D method where we interacted with food previously, and we're going to create a new method. And if you're wondering why my coding software here looks different, that's because I'm no longer using MonoDevelop. I'm using Microsoft Visual Studio. A bit of time has passed between this video and the last one, so Unity has upgraded. You can still use either, but if you are using a newer version of Unity, you probably will be using Microsoft Visual Studio now. Let's go here and create a new private method, and we're going to create private void interact with food. And I'm doing this first because I'm just going to clean up some of this other code, and then I'm going to immediately create private void interact with tail, spell it correctly, and I'm going to cut this code out of this method. I'm going to paste it in here, and now we are going to call this method from here, interact with food, and we're going to have to pass it that spawn pause variable, so I'm putting that in brackets. And we'll have to recreate this here and say vector2 spawn pause, and that squiggly line should disappear. And now we're going to create another if statement, and we're going to say if trigger.tag equals tail, we are going to interact with tail. There we go. Now what are we going to put under here? Well, first of all, we're going to go create a new using statement, and we're going to say using Unity engine.sceneManagement semicolon, which will now let us, I don't know if my microphone picked up on that, but that was my getting a text message on my phone. And we are going to type in here load scene. We're going to type first scene manager.load scene, and from the last video you might recall we called this the lose scene, so we're just going to put in quotation marks lose, or whatever you called yours if you called it something different. And by the way, the reason we're doing this is just to code cleanly. It's not necessary, but I do like trying to keep my code as clean as possible, and this just gives us a little more flexibility with how we call methods. It's a good idea to call other methods from within call method like onTriggerEnter. So now, basically, if we are interacting with the tail, we should automatically just load that lose scene. So let's go save this and test it out. I'm pressing play here. So get us another one because we can't run into our own tail with 2. And yes, we can. But if you notice, I actually ran into my own tail by going directly back up into it. That is bad. That is not how Snake works. So let's make sure to fix that. So when we can only run into our own tail, not by reverting back into it in that way. So there's probably a number of ways to do this, but I think the cleanest and most easiest is by using an enumerator. Now, if you're not familiar with, let me put my phone on do not disturb mode. There we go. Okay. So we are going to create a private enum, and we are going to call this snake direction. And an enumerator is basically like a drop-down list. It only lets us pick from certain values. And the way we create these values is by putting them in squiggly brackets. And I'm just going to call this up, down, left, and right. And now we are going to make a private snake direction, snake deer. And we start the game by moving right. So I have to give this an initial value. And I'm going to say snake direction is initially equal to snake direction dot right, because I know that's what direction we're moving. And now, whenever we change direction, we are going to set that direction. So we're going to say snake dir is equal to snake direction dot up, because we are pressing the up arrow here. And then to save some time, I can just copy this code and paste it here and type down, left. And if you notice, the cool thing about enumerators are it automatically gives us the values when we press dot. So I can actually just double click from this list and press right. I can only choose from those directions. Okay, so we've assigned our directions. We are moving up. And now the idea is we want to be able to move up only if we're not moving in the opposite direction, which is down. So we're just going to bury this within another if statement, and we're going to say here, if the snake direction is currently equal, well, if it's not equal to snake direction dot down, then we are going to allow ourselves to move up. Put this in the squiggly brackets, and I can copy this over and paste this here as well. So we're moving down in this one as long as we're not moving up. And just make sure you handle your squiggly brackets correctly, because this can get a little confusing and very easy to either add an extra bracket or remove an extra bracket. Then your code's going to have errors, and you're going to have a lot of red lines. So just be very careful with how you are doing that. I can see I just accidentally hit insert or something and deleted a bracket. Don't want to do that. Snake direction dot right. There we go. And let's press Control S and test this out one more time. Okay, so I am trying to move right. Whoops. So I did something wrong, at least in one of these directions. I can move left and right into each other. That's not proper. However, I cannot move up and down into each other, so that is proper. Let's see where I made a mistake here. If snake direction is not equal to, okay, to left and to right. I mixed those two up. Let's press Control S again and go test that out one more time with me properly doing it. When you're dealing with a lot of similar names and variables, it can get very confusing, but I can see now I can't move right into myself. I can't move left into myself. However, if I press the buttons really quickly, I still can. So that's still not working properly. We're close, but we're not exact. And the reason for this is because if we say that we want to move up, we are changing that direction immediately. However, if we look at the way the game is working, just because we're changing the direction immediately, there's still a brief delay where the snake head has to actually move from one tile to the next. So it is still entirely possible for the snake to run into itself if you type that too quickly. So let's do this. Since we are moving in steps, there's a pretty easy way we can take care of this. We're calling this from an invoke repeating. So I'm just going to make a new private int variable. Actually, I'm going to make a couple of private int variables, and I'm going to call one of these current step and total steps. So two variables here, and every time we move, we are going to increment the total steps by 1. And then here, when we change direction, we are going to set the current step equal to whatever the total steps is at this point. I'm going to copy this, and we have to do this within each of the if statements because we're calling the change direction every frame, so we don't want to be doing this. We don't want to be putting this outside the if statements, otherwise this wouldn't work. And now all we want to do here, where we're calling this, is say if the current step is not equal to the total steps. So basically, if we're not on the same step, then we can change direction. Otherwise, we cannot. And let's test this out one more time, see if it's working. Okay, so now I'm pressing the buttons really fast, and it will not let me move into myself because we are not incrementing the steps that way. So we probably need at least 4, maybe even 5 to lose if we're treating this being good here. There we go. So 5 tail pieces to lose. You can play around with this a little more. You can make the code a little more efficient, but I'm just going for simplicity here right now. So that is sufficient for these purposes. That is working. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.